When I was in my 20s, I loved to celebrate New Year. But now that I'm a bit older, I find that this time of year, you can look back and feel as if maybe all those good years feel like they're behind you. The children are gone and you find yourself wondering, what now? You might not say it out loud, but you think it. And part of you quietly believes that your best years are over. But here's what I've discovered. When you look at the stories of the women in the Bible, you start to notice that God does some of his most meaningful work after the women think it's all over, or when things haven't turned out the way they hoped. And today I want to talk to you about why I think that matters for you and for the story that God wants to write in your life. And I'm not talking about some cleaned up Instagram ready version of life. I'm talking about real life. These were women who'd lost hope, felt overlooked or invisible, were grieving, or were just convinced they'd disqualified themselves altogether. He meets us right in the middle of our messy lives. Naomi had lost everything, her husband, her sons, her future. She returned home to Bethlehem empty and bitter. But God gave her back more than she ever imagined was possible. Or the Samaritan woman. She came to the well alone in the heat of the day to avoid other women. She felt she disqualified herself. She was an outsider, even in her own town. And yet Jesus chose her. He met her right at the well, and she became the one who shared the good news to her entire community. These stories are of women who thought it was over and discovered that God had not finished writing their story yet. And he's not finished with your story yet either. I know what it feels like to think you're done. I went through the heartbreak of a divorce, and then my youngest son left home with just 2 weeks' notice, and suddenly I found myself all alone in a house that had once been home to a family, and now it was just me and the dog. And after years of being a wife and mother, I was no longer either, or so it felt to me. And I struggled to know who I was now that the kids had left home. Honestly believed that I had nothing more to offer to my family, to God, or the church. And the women around me in church, they seemed to have it all together. So what did I think I had to offer? Nothing. And I think that many of us quietly believe that same thing. We don't say it out loud, but we think it. We're finished because the kids have gone. Finished because life looks different from how we expected. Finished because things that once defined us have changed or we've moved on. But that's not how God sees it. And there's one woman in the Bible whose quiet story has taught me that. Her name was Tabitha, or Dorcas. You can find her story in Acts chapter 9. She lived in a little village by the sea called Joppa. And here's what I love about her. By the world's standards, she didn't do anything spectacular. She sewed garments. That's it. Tunics, robes, practical things for the widows in her community. But these widows were outcasts, invisible and dependent on charity, often ignored. And here's what was really happening behind the scenes. She was touching their hearts, changing how they saw themselves. Each garment she sewed gave these women back their dignity. Every stitch was a quiet act of love. Every garment said, "You are seen, you matter, you have worth." She wasn't preaching, and she wasn't leading a ministry. She was just doing what she could with the skills God had given her. And it changed lives. When she died, the widows wept and begged Peter to come. And when he did, they showed in the robes she'd made them. They were grieving so much more than the loss of a friend. They were grieving the fact that because without her, they feared they would become invisible, unseen, and unloved again. That's the power of what one woman did. It wasn't anything to do with sewing. It was the love folded into every seam. And what I love is that Tabitha didn't focus on what she didn't have. She simply used what God had given her to help others see their worth through his eyes. And it mattered so much to God that he saw fit to include her story in the pages of our Bible for us to read hundreds of years later. I do know how it feels to stand in your kitchen and hear only a deafening silence where once there was the sound of laughter. But here's what I want you to hear today. You're not starting from zero. All those years of serving your family, not wasted. All those hard seasons, not pointless. all your faithfulness, that holding on when life was tough, God hasn't forgotten any of it. You are not beginning again with nothing. It might feel like that, but I know it simply isn't true. You're beginning again with everything you've learned about yourself and about God. All these years, He's been teaching you, showing you His heart, helping you to grow in wisdom. Each thing you've learned is a pearl of wisdom He's put inside you. Each trial you've gone through, an opportunity to walk alongside others going through that same struggle. If you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, or beyond, you've got a few chapters behind you, but there are still some chapters to come. Don't be tempted to write them off. Because it's only in the final chapters of the book of Ruth that Naomi holds her grandson in her arms, that everything she'd been through finally begins to make sense. It's only at the well in the heat of the day, when she meets Jesus, that the Samaritan woman's life finally begins to make sense. These final chapters aren't a fizzle. They're where everything lands, where everything finally makes sense. And you know what? I see women like Tabitha everywhere. Women in their 50s, 60s, or 70s, making sandwiches for a soup run, caring for their grandchildren, checking in on a friend, sorting baby clothes at a baby bank, quietly showing up for a small charity week after a week. No platform, no spotlight, just faithful, loving presence, just like Tabitha. That's not nothing. That's how God works. You are not past your usefulness. You're not invisible, and you are not forgotten. God sees you, He knows you, and He's already writing your next chapter. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to share how God found me in that silent house and gave me a purpose I could never have seen coming. And I believe He might want to do the same for you. So if that sounds like something you need to hear, please consider subscribing. Because however broken, overlooked, or invisible you feel right now, God sees you, and He's not finished with your story yet.